Like just so nice. You don't have to like bad about like right. Like what you do. So I'm like
That's something I'm very proud of. Your husband. Bye.
I love that though. That's how I get before every time. Okay, sorry. Bad question to ask. Oh, that was like.
Didn't know you were
And her mom, my it's my cousin's engaged, but my mom tells her mom, I
Connor by David.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
And I got a place. Well, I don't know whether well, we'll see. I like that.
I'm so glad I could drive. True.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's what I feel like that's important. Yeah. Exactly. It's like, But I never really want to. Now that I can drive. There you go.
Right. The Anishinaabe. Hello, friends. Such a pleasure to see a full, wonderful room of folks. I also want to take a moment to welcome our folks who are joining us by Zoom, family who are in here. My name is Elizabeth Corner. My pronouns are she and her. And the best job in the world is I get to be here at the Quinney College of Law.
We'll sing and dance.
Oh.
I wonder if they control it.
Okay, can we try this again? Is that better? All right. Yes. Awesome. It's really an honor to be here with you all today and to welcome you to our Bystander Initiative celebration in honor of Professor Amos Guiora and the incredible team who has worked with him on all of his efforts, and also to celebrate the establishment of the Alexander Z. Guiora Bystander Initiative Award in honor of his father. So thank you for joining us today. Given that the Salt Lake Valley has always been a gathering place for folks, and in particular indigenous peoples, I do want to acknowledge that this land, which is named for the Ute tribe, is the traditional ancestral homelands of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes, and that it is a crossroad for indigenous peoples. We here at the University of Utah recognize the enduring relationship between many indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. We are grateful for the territory upon which we gather today. We respect Utah's indigenous peoples, who are the original stewards of this land, and we value the sovereign relationships that exist between tribal governments, state governments, and the federal government. Now, most of you know Amos personally. You know that he doesn't sleep. You have probably received one of his middle of the night no bullshit emails. You've seen him do media interviews, speaking in front of the legislature. You've read his books, which includes the forthcoming book on Jeremy Bell and the forthcoming first of its kind book series published by the American Bar Association called Guiora on Enablers. It is no surprise that this year's graduating class, the class of 2024, voted him Outstanding Professor of the Year, and that last year he won the Benyon Center's Distinguished Faculty Service Award. What you may not know is Amos's tireless work is his way of honoring his father's and mother's Holocaust legacy, both of whom were survivors of the Holocaust. And he said to me, Elizabeth, no bullshit, but I don't usually get verklempt, but this is making me a little emotional to think about my parents. And so we honor his father and certainly his mother as well today. Amos's work is strongly influenced by his family. I've been able to learn a lot more myself about Alexander Z. Guiora as our generous donors, Professor Tom Scoville and Brian King, have helped us to establish this award in his name. I've learned that he's not only a great father, but an extraordinary mentor, which is a tradition that Amos tries to carry on in his own work, working with a team of student researchers on the Bystander Initiative. Now today we're going to hear first from Amos, and then we're going to hear from Professor Tom Scoville, Representative Brian King, and our own inaugural Guiora awardee, Anna Hall. Amos, big congratulations on all you've achieved. The floor is yours, my friend.
Dean Cronk-Warner, distinguished guests, colleagues, friends, and students. This gathering reflects a remarkable confluence between the personal and the professional, a rare melding of the two for which I am both grateful and humbled. The decision by Professor Scoble to name the Bystander Initiative Award in my late father's name is truly one of those moments in life when you step back and take a deep breath. I cannot sufficiently convey the depth of my appreciation. To have a former student of my father's reach out to me, much less name a gift in his honor, is simply remarkable. Thank you, Tom. That was only matched by Representative Brian King's decision to match Professor Scoble's generosity. I will shortly explain the deep connection and its profound impact. To call your respective decisions extraordinary would be an understatement. What is beyond heartwarming is the range of our supporters, whether individuals or organizations here in Salt Lake City, throughout the United States, and internationally. To all donors and supporters, please know your engagement is what facilitates our work, impact, and contribution. Most importantly, and this I emphasize, it provides the resources for the students, underline, whose commitment and dedication to the Bystander Initiative is a never-ending source of amazement and deep appreciation. I cannot emphasize that. In preparing my brief comments, I asked myself, how the hell do I introduce my dad to people who know nothing about him other than what Tom will share? So what I did is I reached out to lifelong friends who know me and my father for a zillion years. I said to them, so how do I introduce my dad? And their comments were strikingly similar, and in no particular order. My father was curious. Tom's head is shaking up and down. Made you felt seen. Gave you the sense you were smarter than you thought of yourself. Was deeply engaged in you. Wanted to listen to you. His eyes sparkled when talking with you. You would never know of his academic stature and success as modesty was the Bible. Notwithstanding what he experienced in the Holocaust, he always, underlined, always saw and sought the best in humanity. One friend did add that while he held my father in deep respect, he asked me to share with you the sartorial insistence of my father's on wearing shorts with high socks and dress shoes. It's true. He also insisted on eating pizza with a fork and knife in spite of my kids' constant effort to have him stop. While these deeply appreciated comments reflect much of what I perceived of him, there was one facet of his life of which I knew nothing. My ignorance of his Holocaust experiences was a direct result of his and my mom's decision not to share with me their travails and horrors. As I learned when I wrote the book Crime of Complicity, they also never shared with each other. As a child, I respected what can only be called an unbreachable wall of silence. That silence was once slightly broken when, as an impertinent 15-year-old, I said to my dad, everybody's father exercises, everybody's father runs, everybody's father plays tennis. You're the only one who doesn't do a damn thing. And he looked at me very quietly, because my father only once in his life raised his voice at me. He looked at me and said, I survived the Holocaust. Don't you think that's enough? And the only thing I could think of doing was like walking backwards. When my father died in October of 2015 in Jerusalem, as I shared with the dean, I raced home because we have this 24-hour rule. We have to do the funeral in 24 hours. And on the flight home, I started drafting the eulogy, thinking, great, what am I going to do? Waiting for me, thankfully. Should have known better. Because my father had left for me a letter that he requested that be read at his funeral. And the letter, which tells you everything you need to know about my dad, as I told you, was a farewell letter to my mom, in which he shared with all of us at his funeral, I read it, and how much he loved her, and how much they had built a life out of the ashes of the Holocaust. That absolute wall, tacit or otherwise, continued for decades, notwithstanding a Holocaust roots trip I took with him to Hungary, where he was the keynote speaker at an extraordinary conference organized by the Hungarian Catholic Church under the auspices of the Vatican. It was an utterly miserable 3 days. He refused, unfailingly politely, because my father was always unfailingly polite, to answer any question. Even when I literally breached the locked walls of the Jewish cemetery in my father's hometown, he refused to share any of his experiences. My ignorance would have stayed just that, if not for two critical, separate but related events. While training for the Salt Lake Marathon, I was asked a question which frankly changed my life and is the reason we're here. I was asked, how did this being the Holocaust, how did this happen? And I'm 66, I was 55 at the time. I came back to my apartment in Sugar House. I said to myself in Hebrew, "Maspeak," which translates into enough. I said, the time has come to A, figure out who the hell my parents really are, and also to try to figure out something about the Holocaust. So I started reading widely. Can't read everything about the Holocaust. It quickly became apparent that there was an issue that had never been addressed ever before, and that's the legal culpability of the bystander in the Holocaust. I made my way to Dr. Victoria Barnett at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., who's one of the two people who had ever written a book about the bystander in the Holocaust. And I went to her office and we chatted. I don't think she was totally convinced I could do this. At the end of the meeting with her, by the way, she had given me half an hour, but I stayed the whole day. And at the end of that, I said to myself, I'm actually going to write this damn book. Then I went to my college roommates, John Lentz in Cleveland, Ohio. I said, Lentz, I've been asked this question. I met with Barnett. What do I do? And Lentz said, well, just write a book. I said, okay. So I wrote a book. Well, that's what you do, is you write a book. And that's how the book, The Crime of Complicity, The Bystander in the Holocaust, was born. As I was writing it, I was aware of the fact that my father was dying. And try as I might, I really tried. I wanted to finish the damn thing before he died, and I failed. Because I really wanted him to have a copy of it in his hand. That book led to two subsequent books, The Armies of Enablers, Survivor Stories of Complicity and Betrayal and Sexual Assaults, and the forthcoming book that the Dean has graciously referenced, The Complicity of Silence, which is based on the murder of a 12-year-old boy in 1997, by his teacher principal, a serial pedophile, who had been enabled for decades by school administrators in two different states. That book, or this new book, is only possible because of an extraordinary detective, Mr. Dan Barber, who 2 or 3 years ago bequeathed the 15,000 pages of documents that led to an article, which I'll discuss in a second, and the book. Those of you who've been to my office know that in addition to the Michigan chair, Jeremy's picture literally sits front and center in my office because he captures, for me, encapsulates the harm caused by the enablers. In addition to those two books, there are two other books that I'm working on along with students, law review articles, and so on and so on. I've also testified on criminalizing enablers and bystanders in the Netherlands, Australia, Canada, and the United States. Which brings me to Brian. When Brian and I first met, 8 years ago, he came into my life, yes? We were working on an effort to have Holocaust education mandatory in the state of Utah. We failed with that, but we became fast friends and partners in crime and seeking to criminalize the bystander and the enabler. So we succeeded with respect to the bystander, thanks to Brian. But for me, with all due respect to the legislation, more importantly than that, Brian afforded me an extraordinary opportunity. And that was to testify in public and to the first time ever in my life acknowledge that my grandparents had been murdered in Auschwitz on May 26, 1944. And the fact that Brian afforded me that opportunity to state that in public was life-changing. The first thing I did was I called my mom, and I told her. And my mom, who was the toughest SOB ever, as a 12-year-old, twice survived being shot in the Holocaust. My mother, through me and Brian, became fast friends because she offered you her chocolate chip cookies, if I recall. Before closing, this bystander initiative owes an enormous debt of gratitude to students, past and present, whose efforts, contributions, dedication are beyond inspiring. to introduce them, for they are truly the stars. I will ask each of them to stand when I call them, including those in the Zoom room, and reference the project they work on. And when I wrote the 3 o'clock in the morning email this morning, I realized that over the course of the past few years, there have been 17 students who've worked with me on this project. So I begin with you, Christine. Christine Hashimoto graduated
2015.
and worked with me on Crime of Complicity. Her sister, Jessie Dyer, worked with me on the co-written article, He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother. Anya Corfine worked with me for the past 2 years on the Jeremy Bell book, including both as a student and after graduating from the U. Maddie Harker, where are you, Maddie? So, Maddie graduated from the U's Honors College, worked with me on Armies of Enabler, was my TA in the honors course in the Bystander, and won the U's Award for Best Student Research based on her work on the Armies. Malaya, who's in Zoom World, worked with me on my testimony before the Australia Legislature. She won the U's Award for Best Undergraduate Paper on the Bystander, and was the TA in the U's Honors Bystander class. Diana Pogosian, I got it. And Matilda Polashchuk. Diana is graduating tomorrow, and Matilda is a junior in the Honors College. They worked with me on we co-authored the law review article about the LDS Church and the Catholic Church and the cost of enabling the churches. Anna Hall and Zeb Gorfinkel, where are you? Zeb is in Honors College. Anna is the recipient, as the dean mentioned, of the inaugural recipient of the Alexander Z. Guiora Award. We co-authored an article about rape of women inmates in prisons. That will be published as well. Peyton Dawn is on Zoom. She's working with me on a book about John Vaughn, who was sexually assaulted as a football player at the University of Michigan. Evan, where are you? Evan Coates is working with me on an article about maltreatment of children based on a grant I got with Professor Perushnik, along with Penelope Birnbaum, who's also on Zoom. And finally, Aya Hibben and Valerie and I co-wrote an article also based on Jeremy Goldman. Before I turn it over to Professor Scoble, I need to say the following. I'm looking at you, Dean, without you and Lexi, none of this is possible. So I can go on, but we all know, those of us in this business know, it's all about leadership. It's all about commitment to giving us the support we need. Thank you so much. Professor Scoble.
A dream deferred is doubly valued. I expected to come here last fall, but that was delayed, and so it's a double pleasure for me to be able to be here and to meet face to face with people who've been names for the last 3 years. I'm going to talk about fathers and sons, and I'm going to basically tell you 2 stories. 55 years ago, when I was completing my doctoral studies in linguistics at the University of Michigan, one of my professors asked if I was interested in working on a research project in the Department of Psychology. Partly attracted by curiosity, but also for a chance to secure some extra funding, one Friday afternoon I ambled over to the office of a certain Professor Alexander Z. Guiora. He immediately captured my interest with his charismatic demeanor, his enthusiasm over my knowledge of the Thai language, and his belief that it was a charming language. Little did I know that over half a century later, it would bring me to this celebratory luncheon today. From then on, for about half a year, I met with Guiora and 3 other members of his team to develop an experiment using the theory of transpositional research, this term, to test the notion that empathy directly correlates with the ability to pronounce a foreign language accurately. I was because we wanted to quantify both the degree of empathy and the degree of phonological accuracy, and link them together, I developed a pronunciation test in Thai that I developed for English-speaking U of M students, who were the subjects. The study was daring, for to summarize it candidly, we were attempting to show that a modest amount of alcohol, which was our correlate to empathy, enhanced one's ability to sound more native in a foreign language. I emphasize the adjective moderate. I had already gotten my doctorate and returned to Thailand, where when the study was published in Comprehensive Psychiatry. I was honored to be listed as the last of the other authors cited after Professor Guiora's name. The effects of experimentally induced changes in ego states on pronunciation ability in a second language, an exploratory study, received uncommon publicity in magazines like Newsweek and in the very first issue of Psychology Today, which shamelessly titled its story, Tying One On. I met Professor Guiora a few times at professional conventions over the decades, where, among other things, he rightfully put me straight about a few details I had published in my own publications, which had misrepresented some of the results of that study. I always treasured what he taught me. I never took a class from him, but only knew him through the work on the alcohol study as it became to know. But he taught me the importance of rigor, creativity, teamwork, and intellectual curiosity. 3 years ago, when recalling my days as a doctoral student, I checked the U of M website for names of emeritus professors to see if I could find Professor Guiora's address. I wanted to write him a note of appreciation after all those years about how he helped me in my professional career. I was saddened to discover that he had died in 215. Noting he had one child, a certain Amos Guiora, who taught law at a place called the University of Utah, I sent an expression of appreciation to his son, and from that initial contact, we became friends, and from that friendship has led to my support for Amos's laudatory goal of imposing justice on those who allow sexual predators to continually prey on their young victims, especially in college programs. The father led me to the son, and that's the reason I'm here today. My second story. But that's only the first. For equally important is the reason why I found this particular cause worth supporting. After all, it deals with depraved individuals whose sordid crimes leaves thousands of young women and men scarred for life. Who wants to deal with stuff like that? Well, I did, but why? Like any significant decision, there were several reasons that led me to support this noble cause. One of them very personal. But looking back over the past 3 years, I became aware that in a real sense, I was destined from birth to participate in the Bystander Initiative. And this leads to the second story. After finishing their clinical training in 1930, my parents took a slow boat to China and began a life of service as Presbyterian medical missionaries at a small hospital in the north. After a few years, that area of northern China was occupied by the Japanese Imperial Army long before the outbreak of the Pacific War. And though Americans were not seen as belligerents, because they were fully dedicated to the Chinese people, my parents were under continual restrictions from the occupying forces. In an unofficial act of independence from these constraints, my father flew an American flag over the hospital compound. And though the site and facilities were paid for by churches in the U.S., this act carried no diplomatic clout. But it turned the hospital into a kind of sanctuary. And every evening, many of the more vulnerable residents of the town would spend the night inside the walls. On the evening of June 2nd, 1938, an armed and drunken Japanese soldier pounded on the hospital gate, demanding to be let in, and the terrified Chinese gateman called for my father's help. Alarmed by the soldier's wanton aggressiveness, my father quickly came up with a ruse to get rid of him. He told the soldier he would show him the way to the sleeping quarters in the back, and walked ahead of him with the gateman by his side. He led the enemy to a side gate to an outside alley, where my dad hoped to trick the drunk into thinking he was about to enter the dormitory, and then would quickly slam the gate shut behind him. Halfway through the front courtyard, suspecting that my father was tricking him, the soldier lifted his rifle and shot my dad in the back. Because the distance was only 2 meters, the impact of the bullet propelled him face downward into the dirt. And while he was helplessly sprawled there, as witnessed by the horrified gateman and another hospital worker, the soldier bent over my father, placed the muzzle of his gun to my dad's forehead, and squeezed the trigger. The only sound was a hollow click. The rifle had misfired. The Chinese hospital workers ran into the courtyard and subdued the soldier and threw him out of the front gate while my dad stumbled into the hospital and collapsed on one of the empty beds. My father survived. I was born 6 months later. So the incident that could have changed my life and the life of my family happened during my second trimester of embryonic growth. In 1979, when my wife and I were teaching under the auspices of the People's Republic of China government, I secured special permission to visit the city where I was born. And I met Lao Li, the only surviving Chinese hospital worker who witnessed this event. Despite the exigencies of his age, he dramatically described what transpired, and at one point reenacted the Japanese soldier's second attempt to end my father's life with his cane, as the rifle. The more vulnerable residents of that town were young women who lived nearby, whom my father allowed to enter the hospital compound each evening to protect them from the sometimes rapacious Japanese soldiers who were garrisoned in the city. Looking back, I have a feeling that even before I was born, I was predestined one day to follow my father's mission to help protect the innocent from sexual predators. And that's the other reason I'm here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Scoville. What a wonderful story. The power of storytelling never fails to impress me. So Amos and I have tried to figure out when it was that we first met. And I think that you're right. I think it was 16. I was thinking it was 17. But 2017 is when I was up here at the Moot Court. And it was when you were unveiling the Complicity book, the first book. And I can't remember how I got invited, but I got invited to this thing up here at the law school. And I'm busy, I'm a lawyer, I serve in the legislature, I've been serving in the legislature since 2009. And, you know, a lot of balls in the air. And I thought, this is interesting to me. I want to go hear this. I want to see what this is about. I remember thinking that. And one of the books that I had read a couple of years before was a book called The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. Many of you have read that book. The subtitle of The Righteous Mind is Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. And that book sensitized me, educated me, made me more aware of the nuance, the complexity of how we as human beings are wired, and the connection between our tribal instincts and our upbringing, the things that we're taught when we're very young before we even can really process information other than take it in, before we can discriminate between wise or unwise information and teachings. We just take it all in. We are, for better or worse, subjects of our upbringing to a remarkable degree. And if we've got great parents who are good examples to us, we're lucky. If we don't, and the people around us have not been able to fill those gaps in, we're not so lucky. But, and to some extent, it's unknowable to all of us, we have differing capacities to overcome those kinds of experiences if they're negative to begin with, some more than others. But that book really triggered in me some thinking about the role of tribal association, the role of families and larger groups, and how we have allegiance to those things, and how sometimes we can be corrupted by those allegiances, and the poor examples of leaders in those groups. So I come up, I listen to Amos talk, I listen to others talk. It's an all-day seminar, as I recall, and I thought, I do not have time to sit around all day for this. I just don't. I got way too many things going. But I also was just riveted. I couldn't move away from this. And it was fascinating to me. For the same reason that I was riveted by Jonathan Haidt's book. And Haidt was saying stuff, for those of you who read the book, he was saying stuff that, as a pretty hardcore Democrat and liberal, I did not want to hear. About the power of some values and some principles that, from a perspective of a liberal Democrat or someone who's trying to get past some of those things and how to move our state forward in terms of what policies we were talking about in the legislature, Haidt was saying, do not fool yourself about what appeals to people and why some principles that don't readily lend themselves to progressive policies, why those are very powerful for people and are hard for many, many people to get past, especially those who think of themselves as traditionalists and conservatives. So as I was listening to this, I stuck around and I went up and introduced myself. Well, Amos and I knew each other from before, but I went up and said, I'm going to stick around. He said, well, stick around as long as you want. It's up to you. I'm happy to have you here. But I think I stuck around for just about all day. And ever since then, Amos and I have worked together to try to move forward in various contexts, whether it's legislative, whether it's educational, whether it's political, move forward some of the concepts that he and I share as being really important. And it has struck me how much of a study, an interesting study in sociology and psychology, what Amos is trying to do in Bystander Initiatives and enabling and understanding enablers. And there is a legal aspect to it without any question. There's a political aspect to it without any question. But at its heart, I think it is a sociological and a psychological phenomenon. And we as individuals are really moved further down the field in understanding it and in being able to act intelligently to address the problems that come with working as a group together in conformity to principles that may not be the best, or working to enable the leadership of leaders who aren't always acting in the best interests of the group or of society at large. So I appreciate the fact that Amos has helped me understand more to a greater extent and think more deeply about the power of tribes, the power of our communal associations. Because you really can't think very deeply at all or experience much of life without recognizing that all due respect to the pull yourself up by your own back bootstraps, self-made man, self-made woman philosophy, which are very important, but literally speaking, they ain't anywhere close to being true. They just aren't. Nobody changed their own diapers. Whether at the end of life or at the beginning of life. Nobody's changed their own diaper. We didn't teach ourselves to read. We got where we are because of the loving sacrifices of other people. And we're grateful for that. We recognize that. But carrying with it comes this truth, this reality that when you deal with groups, you have to work together as a group a lot of times, and there is leadership that's required to lead the group. And we're pretty darn loyal as tribe members to the leaders of our tribe. We just are. It's hardwired. And it's powerful. And I look at that and I scratch my head. And Amos and I have talked a lot. He's been kind enough to invite me to speak at his classes, and we have some frank exchanges with students. It's a lot of fun. The people in this room know, either because they're students or because you deal every day with students, how much fun it is to have the kind of interactions that we do with students and have these conversations about why things are the way they are and how we can change, and trying to get a better idea of identifying the problem, identifying the dynamics that cause the elements of it that cause a certain dynamic. But one of the things that I think is important to recognize is the power of tribes. I look at, Amos has written about this, a guy like Larry Nassar, team doctor, Michigan State, a tremendously important figure within that athletic community. You've got to have a good athletic doctor working with athletes who are involved in the highest levels of competition, stressing their bodies to the ultimate degree, and they're going to have injuries. You've got to have somebody who's skilled who can deal with them. But that also puts them in a very vulnerable situation vis-a-vis that doctor. And if that doctor, for whatever reason, is not acting up to levels of high integrity and principle, you're going to have real disaster happen. And of course, Larry Nassar abused hundreds of athletes. And one of the things that Amos talked about was in his interviews, of course, he did a lot of work. He's done enormous amounts of work over many years in this area. But one of the stories that he told me that was most remarkable was one of the young women who had been abused went to her father and said, "Something's not right here. I just don't think that Dr. Nassar is doing the right thing." And the doctor said, or the father said, "What do you mean?" "Well, he's behaving in this way in our exams. He's touching me in this way or that way in a way that is not right." And her father dismissed it. And then time goes on, and the truth comes out, verified by many, many other witnesses and individuals who had been abused, besides this man's young daughter. And he realizes the truth and can't live with it, takes his own life. The kind of pain, the kind of devastation that's created by leaders who, you can attach many adjectives to them: evil, narcissistic. There are a lot of ways you can describe them. But the kind of pain and problems they cause for all of us is not something that we can or should dismiss, or that we shouldn't strive to get to the bottom of in terms of understanding how and why it happens, and more important for purposes of Amos's research, what we as individuals need to do, what we can do and what we have to do in responding to that. I'm so grateful for his work in sensitizing and educating me and everybody in this room and others who have been within his reach about what we can do, what we have to do, to ensure that to the degree that we are led astray with cognitive dissonance, with loyalty to leaders of groups that we are we know in our heart of hearts is the most wonderful group in the world, whether it's the bowling league or an organized religion or, you know, whatever it is. It can be family relationships, but we know how wonderful that group is, and we don't want to believe that it's anything other than good and pure. Well, there are times, of course, when it's led astray by really terrible human beings who are at the top of the pyramid. And of course, no group is unadulteratedly good or evil for that matter. But I appreciate so much and want to express the appreciation of Amos's work and the need for it to go forward in a way that I think will benefit all of us. So thank you, Dr. Guiora. A couple of things that I would just close with. We have to be courageous as individuals to address this last point about what is it that we can and should do as individuals with this kind of knowledge about how much damage can be done by those who are taking advantage of positions of power to enrich. And sometimes it's with money, sometimes it's just satisfying of appetites, other more subtle, nuanced things perhaps that they feel they gain by abusing others. But what do we do with that? Well, a couple of things. Number one, I think we have to be courageous in speaking plainly based on the facts about abuse when we see it. To do otherwise, when we know that abuse is taking place and we don't act on it, we are complicit. We are enabling that behavior to continue. That's what happens with Larry Nassar when people above him in leadership positions, either above or equal to his, hear about these things, repeated reports, and they say, well, I don't believe it, despite accumulating numbers of credible individuals coming and saying, this is happening. Or they say, it may be true, but boy, it sure puts us in a tough situation for me to confront Dr. Nassar. It makes me uncomfortable. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to leave it to somebody else. Surely someone else will do it. There are a lot of reasons that we don't act, but we have to be courageous in stepping up to act and speaking plainly based on facts. Factual information and acting based on facts is critically important because we're so subject to cognitive dissonance and justifying and rationalizing away facts that we don't want to believe in because they make us feel uncomfortable or because they cause us to challenge authority that we don't want to see challenged. We don't want to challenge ourselves. And then the second thing, we've got to use good judgment in how we choose to address it and how we raise it and how we seek to bring an end to those kind of behaviors. And that's a real challenge. I mean, up at the legislature, which has little resemblance to athletes being abused at Michigan State University, but nevertheless is a situation where you're part of a small tribe, where you're trying to get things done. Did you know that I was the minority leader for 8 years at the Utah State Legislature? And the minority, I was a super minority leader, and people would sometimes introduce me and I would say, they'd say, this is Brian King's minority leader in the Utah State House of Representatives. I would say, you have insulted me. I'm the super minority leader. They said, no. Super modifies minority, not leader. And they were right, of course. But you know, it's hard. You've got to figure, in dealing, we all know this intuitively, but I'll make it explicit. It's hard to deal with each other in organizations effectively when you need to call out behavior that has to be addressed and corrected, and do it without, excuse the expression, pissing people off in a way that is counterproductive for your ability to continue to work with the group in the future. That's a real challenge. Y'all know this. We all do it every day, and families, and back to the bowling leagues, or the faculty at the University of Utah College of Law, or within the LDS Church, or whatever it is that we're talking about. Threading that needle effectively, really tough. Essential to do? Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me just close by reading a quote. You've all heard this before, but it's so beautiful. And I thought it was appropriate in tribute to my friend Amos, because he is on one side of this equation. And I'll let you know, as I read it, you'll know immediately which side of this equation he's on. This is a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. You may be 38 years old, as I happen to be, and one day some great opportunity stands before you and calls you to stand up for some great principle. some great issue, some great cause. And you refuse to do it because you're afraid. You refuse to do it because you want to live longer. You're afraid that you'll lose your job, or you're afraid that you'll be criticized, or that you will lose your popularity, or you're afraid that somebody will stab you or shoot you or bomb your house, so you refuse to take a stand. Well, you may go on and live until you're 90, but you're just as dead at 38 as you would be at 90. And the cessation of breathing in your life is but the belated announcement of an earlier death of the spirit. Beautiful. Let's have the kind of spirit that Martin Luther King was talking about and that Amos Guiora embodies. Thank you.
Our next speaker is the inaugural recipient of the Alexander Z. Guiora Award. Anna and I worked together along with Zev on the article. Anna and I have been working together for a year on this huge project which led to the article. And the decision to name her the inaugural recipient, first of all, is a lifelong thing. Now that you've heard about my father and you've read about my father, I think you will understand, from my perspective, the importance of this whole undertaking and the fact that indeed you are the inaugural recipient. The floor is yours.
Hello. So first I just want to say how honored I am to be receiving this and to be the inaugural recipient. Guiora doesn't like it when I say that I'm honored because he always says to me, well, you deserve it. And I say, well, I can't get up and say that, Guiora. So. But I can't express just how grateful I am to Professor Scoville for his contribution and to Representative King for his contribution, for their generous funding of this scholarship that I was able to receive this past year, so that I could work with Professor Guiora on this article and this project, which has been one of the greatest honors of my life. The work that we do in this initiative is so important. So I want to tell you a little bit about the specific article that I co-authored with Professor Guiora and Zev Gorfinkel. And our article is titled, "The Ominous Sound of Keys Enabling Sexual Assaults in Prisons." So this entire journey began when someone shared with Professor Guiora about FCI Dublin, which is a federal female correctional institute, low level security, a little bit of a medium level, located right outside of Oakland, California, called FCI Dublin, where female inmates were being sexually assaulted by male prison guards and staff. To date, there have been 8 indictments, 7 which have resulted in guilty pleas or verdicts, one of which is heading to trial in the next couple of months. The assaults were perpetrated from the highest ranked, the warden, down to some of the lower level ranked and also the chaplain. And what was happening to these women, it's horrible. It was horrible, it still is horrible. And we started to look at who were the enablers, because it was very clear who the perpetrators were. It was Warden Garcia, it was, it was High House, it was, excuse my language in saying this, but as they called him and as he is cited in civil lawsuits and in his indictment as Dirty Dick Smith. It was people like that who were the perpetrators, but we thought this has been going on since about the 1990s at FCI Dublin. It was nicknamed the Rape Club. How did something like this happen for so many years with really nothing being done about it? So we started to look at the enablers, and eventually Guiora agreed with Zev and I that this system was also an enabler, that this system, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, was enabling these individuals in the way that their reporting system is set up. But we also named a specific person who's named Lieutenant Stephen Putnam, and he was the head of SIS, which is the Special Investigative Services at FCI Dublin. And he was tasked with investigating any allegations, whether inmate on inmate, staff on inmate, that were happening in the prison, and then his job was to, send it outside the prison to OIA, OIG, somebody else to investigate that in what was happening internally. According to his own testimony in Warden Garcia's trial, which I read through hundreds of pages of that trial transcripts, He was over 100 cases behind, some dating back as far as 6 years. So some of these women could have still been housed with their abusers while he, according to his testimony under oath, wasn't even doing the paperwork for these cases. Just a couple of weeks ago, FCI Dublin was abruptly shut down, and the entire way and process in which that happened is absolutely horrific and inhumane. A quick Google search today of FCI Dublin will bring up tons of articles about what happened to these women. They announced on a Monday that they were shutting it down. They wanted everybody out by Friday. And I won't get into details, but it's truly horrific what they did to these women. And as of today, I believe all the women have been transferred to different prisons, but many of them had no clue where they were going. They didn't know that this was coming because it was so abrupt. But that just recently happened. So while we looked at FCI Dublin as kind of our case study, it's the one that we focused on, it's the one that's been the most highlighted in the media, this is happening across the nation. It's happening in other federal women's facilities, and we do reference that a little bit in our article. And so when I kind of started to think about what difference is this making, what difference has this article made, which was accepted for publication. You can read it right now on SSRN, but it was accepted for publication by the Criminal Law Bulletin. And so I've been emailing our article out to lots and lots of people, legislators, attorneys who represent the victims, other leaders of victim rights organizations, lots of things like that. And so I wanted to share a couple of responses that we've received. So I emailed our article to an attorney who represents 36 victims of FCI Dublin. And she responded back with this. She said, "Thanks for reaching out. It is way too often that the coverage focuses on individual perpetrators and the victims rather than the enablers. And it's always been my belief that sexual abuse cannot occur in correctional settings without systemic complicity. So it is very nice to see this same concept materialize in a scholarly article. I appreciate all the work you've done in this, and I'm sure that we as litigators will benefit from the knowledge and the attention generated towards this topic thanks to your work." And then another one is Professor Guiora posted on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. He posted our article on there. And we received a response from somebody who we've never spoken to. And this is what she said. She said, "Thank you for your research. I'm a former FCI Dublin inmate. This is one of the most important papers I've ever read. Highly recommend to anyone who cares about the abuse of inmates." And when I saw that, I immediately took a screenshot of it and I sent it to Guiora. And it made me emotional when I read it, and it still does today, because I thought that's the difference this is making. It is making a difference in real people's lives who are a vulnerable population who have suffered things that they shouldn't have to suffer. And many of these victims who testified at Warden Guiora's trial, since only 2 of them went to trial, in their victim impact statements, one of them, I'm kind of paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact quote, but she essentially says, "I know that what I did was wrong. I know that I have to serve my time here, but nowhere in my sentence did it say I was going to be raped by the people that are supposed to protect me." And I think that's something that we have to remember when we're talking about the abuse of federal female inmates. So my life has truly been changed by doing this research and writing this article. I want to again thank Professor Schofield and Representative King for your contributions that have enabled me in a very positive way to be able to work on this past year with Professor Guiora. I want to thank my co-author Zev for the many times that he would Zoom with me so I could bounce ideas off of him, and also computing all the numbers, because I don't like numbers, so he did all of that for us, and so I'm so grateful. And he read so much content. Guiora had to tell him, "You need to stop reading. Like, you just gotta because he would just obtain so much information." I want to thank my family for always listening to me talk about it. I would always talk to them about it. My grandma, who's here with me today, she's from the Bay Area. She lives pretty close to FCI Dublin, and she would always send me updates of the local news of FCI Dublin. So the way that I first found out that FCI Dublin was getting abruptly closed is because she texted me the article immediately, and she said, "Have you seen this?" And so I'm thankful for her as well. And it's been interesting to see the influence that it's had on people in my life too, that, before FCI Dublin was closed, a few weeks prior to that, it was raided by the FBI. And my dad was texting me, my grandma, my aunt, people were emailing me who we had spoken to, and I thought, now they're invested in this, something that they maybe wouldn't have thought of before, but now they're invested in it as well. I also want to thank Guiora's family, who I know are on Zoom, and I've never met any of them, but I see your pictures on his walls in his office, and he talks about you all very often, and so hopefully we will get the opportunity to meet one day. And I want to thank Professor Guiora for giving me this opportunity. Working with him has truly been an absolute pleasure. Even with the 3 a.m. no BS emails, which is literally his subject line, no BS, and then he'll like fill us in on whatever it is that he wants to talk about. I think I woke up to 4 emails just this morning, so. But I love it.
That's all?
Yeah, I know, right? That's the right. Like sometimes I'm like, whoa, I didn't get an email from Guiora today. So. And so I want to end with saying, although I never knew Guiora's father, I did get to read what people said about his father. And they are honestly many of the same ways in which I would describe Professor Guiora. He's a no BS person. He tells us that constantly. He makes you feel seen. He makes you feel way smarter than you are. I did not feel like, I was like, I don't know what you're asking of me, but I don't think I'm capable of this. But he truly believes in his students, and he works with you. He always says, we're not like this, we're this. We're a team, we're working together on it. And, you know, he believed in me. He believed in my ability to co-author and do the research and reach out to people for this and Zoom with people and talk to people. And because of that, I truly believe in myself. And in this work, I truly believe in this work, and my life will forever be impacted because of what I've been able to do here. And I do hope that I'll continue to have the opportunity to push for legislation at the federal level so that we can help people and stop this cycle of harm that's being done. So I'm truly honored, and I'm truly grateful to be the recipient of this award. And yeah, just thank you so much, everybody.
When I wrote Armies of Enablers, one of the people who I spent a bazillion hours with was Tiffany Thomas, who I had no idea until 2 hours ago that she was going to fly in from California for today's event. I was downstairs reading all of you, and there is Tiffany. This is the third time we've met. The first time we met at Manley's law firm.
Yes.
And the second time we actually met here when the documentary was filmed. Of all the people who I've interacted with over the course of the past 10 years we've been working, there is no doubt that one of the people who has had the greatest impact on me is Tiffany. We have spent a gazillion hours together.
Yeah.
She, in many ways, is front and center in the book, Armies of Enablers. Tiffany taught me the following. I was home in before Zoom, I was Skyping. Way back. And all of a sudden, it's not important where Tiffany lives, I'll leave that to her to share. When she starts grabbing her throat, and she was choking. And I was like, thinking to myself, here's the ultimate irony. I'm the bystander guy, and I'm Zooming with her, Skyping with her. She's choking. How do I call from Iz to Cali? And what do I do with 911 here, right? She's literally choking. I was like screaming at her to stop. And she finally stopped. And I said, like, what was that? And she said to me the following. Mr. G, this is how I wake up every morning. Choking. More than that, if I may, we're all adults here. They are fucking choking me. And I said, who was fucking choking me? And she said, the enablers. And that for me is one of the most powerful moments in my life. Floor is yours.
Excuse me. I tell myself I'm not going to be emotional every time I'm in his presence, but it's just something about him. But before I get into that, thank you to everyone for giving me an opportunity to speak. and excuse me for being human. To Ms. Hall, I should not have really spoken after you because the floor is yours today. Congratulations. May you continue to prosper and soar and conquer and protect. I appreciate you, your colleague, the students that stood and were recognized today. May you all continue to bring hope to people and victims, survivors like myself. To Professor Guiora, thank you for listening when nobody would. Thank you for hearing me when nobody would listen. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to put on paper how I felt, what I went through, what I was dealing with, how no one listened. And most importantly, to all of you all who are working on making enablers be held accountable for their actions. I'm still dealing with that. For those of you who may not have read the book, I am Tiffany Thomas, formerly Tiffany Thomas Lopez. Excuse me. I was a Michigan State University softball player and a victim of Larry Nassar. I told many people what was happening to me. And I stood my ground as best as I could as a 17-year-old coming into college, as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old. This went on for multiple years, and I endured this trauma, and no one listened. And the reason why I'm so appreciative of all of you all working to continue to fight is because my enablers are still employed at Michigan State University. They still work there, they still have jobs, they still get paid, and they're still held in high regard. And like Professor said, my chokehold has loosened because of you all, and him especially, but it has not lost its grip fully. I would just again like to thank everyone out in the Zoom world, especially Maddie. I remember working with you so very closely. Thank you, Miss. Professor Guiora, I will break down and it will be the ugliest cry ever. So I will not, but please, sir, know that I appreciate you. I traveled all this way to let you know that I love you. I appreciate you. I love you so much. You lifted so much off of me. You gave me life again. You will never understand that you gave me life again, that I'm able to come here and stand in front of you all and talk about something so painful. But it's because of you just giving me an opportunity and making me feel like I am worthy. I appreciate you, sir. I appreciate you, Dean, Miss Lexi, and you all for your time. Please don't go away with these sad tears. Let me make it a happy goodbye. May everyone in here continue to be blessed and move forward. And thank you.
Ooh, Tiffany, those are not sad tears. Those are powerful tears. You have moved us today. What fate that Amos and I were sitting down in the lobby 7 minutes late for this event, just wanting to greet anybody who had a hard time finding a parking spot. And Amos starts mumbling under his breath, "What on earth? What?" And you were walking up. I didn't know what was going on. And to be able to meet you and have everybody in this room meet you today and see the face, the actual impact of this work is so profound and so beautiful. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being brave, for speaking up again and again, despite so many enablers ignoring you and letting, horrible things happen. You are brave, you are good, you are powerful, and we're so grateful to hear you today. I've been at the University University of Utah for 17 years now, and I never sit in events and get goosebumps and feel the absolute power in the room. Nevertheless, a topic like this, a weighty topic about enablers and bystanders of abuse, especially sexual abuse. But I think we can all agree that sitting in this room, we feel power, we feel hope. I think you feel not just defeated and like, what are we gonna do? The world is going to hell. No. Because of the work that is happening here, Professor Guiora, who doesn't sleep, and his team of students who have lost a lot of sleep, I'm sure, and are going on to do amazing things like Anna Hall at the DA's office. My goodness, we're in good hands. When I was interviewing for this job at the College of Law a year and a half ago or so, Amos was on the committee interviewing me, and I already knew who he was. And he gave me a hard time in the interview, you know, he how he does, you know. And and the second I got the job, he emailed me and said, let's meet, let's talk, we're gonna be a team. And we met, and he said, I started this initiative, you know, recently, a year and a half ago, and surprisingly, some people have given me some money. I've got so many students who want to work for me, they're knocking down my door. I want to be able to compensate them for the work they're doing. We're writing law review articles, we're writing books, we're speaking in front of the legislature, we're doing media interviews, and a lot of these guys are just doing it free of charge. Our students who are already drowning in debt in law school are just doing this work because they believe in this work. And it's not just because Professor Guiora is such an amazing leader that we all just want to follow him, which we do. And I said, okay, that's easy. Of course people have been throwing a little bit of money at you to help support this work, but let's package this. Let's find a way to institutionalize this just a little bit more and let people know that the Bystander Initiative at the University of Utah SJ Quinney College of Law is doing amazing work and can do more with just a little bit of support. He's paying these wonderful students hourly wages, much less than any of the rest of you are making, to do work that is changing lives and saving lives. It is such an easy thing to talk about. So I come here today as the Director of Development and Alumni. I oversee the fundraising for this stuff. And this is just one of those things that, of course, we have amazing supporters like Professor Scoble and Representative King, and so many of the rest of you who have given to this cause. We are so grateful for you. The dollars you give have made a profound impact in real people's lives. And to be able to hire more and more students to do this work and to help Guiora, who only has 24 hours in the day, even though he's using all of them, is a really amazing thing. This isn't just theory, you know? This isn't just publishing papers that float out into the ether for other professors to read and cite. No, this is work that is getting in the hands of change makers and lawmakers to make a real difference in the world. And I think we all feel that power today and that hope. So thank you for being here. Thank you to the Bystander Initiative, to every one of you who have worked on it. What a profound work you're doing. Thank you, Professor Guiora. Do you want to close things out?
The Dean, do you want to close? You want me to close? You close? I don't even know what to say. It's hard to leave me speechless. I think one of the first times anybody left me speechless was the dean at the dinner a year and a half ago, when she said the truth, and she repeated it today, which is that, yes, we all get the 3 a.m. emails, right? We all chuckle. But the truth of the matter is, what drives this for me, indeed, are my parents. Because I understand, trust me, the cost of complicity of the bystander and the enabler. If there's one thing that I've learned over the past 10 years, is the unimaginable travails of my parents, his and hers, was in many ways possible, only possible, because of the bystander and the enabler. And it's true, I really don't sleep, because I understand that when I hear someone like Tiffany, real harm, real people. And Larry Nassar is a total piece of shit. But Larry Nassar doesn't happen without the enablers. It That's the truth. And every one of the people who've interacted with over the years, that is the purpose. The purpose like this, purpose of zero interest. The real harm is the ecosystem of the enabler. And I look to those who are working with me next year, the three of you there, right? This is an all-in fight. The only way this can be addressed is all in, all hands on deck. I said an hour ago, and I'm going to repeat myself on this, I stop. Most of you know I served for 20 years in the military. I understand leadership. I get it. I'm looking at you, Dean Warner. Without your extraordinary support, this doesn't happen. On that note, all of you, thank you for coming.
Yeah, she should have logged in. She was able to log in, so she should have been good, but.
Court.
Of course! No, really, there was so much stuff that you read that there's no way I couldn't have done it all.
I think we made a good team.
Hi, Dash Jim.
Let me say it one more time, y'all.